bringing you information based in fact and science concerning today's marijuana. I'm your host, Chris Wolf, and this is Perspectives. With us today is a subject matter expert from the National Marijuana Initiative, sharing their perspective on the influence that today's more potent forms of marijuana products are having, both in our society and in their field of expertise. All right, hello, Laura Stack, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here.
Laura, tell us, what are the impacts of marijuana on adolescents?
Well, Chris, I had a son, Johnny Stack, who sadly died by suicide at the age of 19 after becoming addicted to high-potency marijuana. We live in Colorado, so I was able to see the impacts that marijuana had on my son, and similarly, all adolescents, sadly. 1 in 6 youth who try marijuana are going to become addicted, and half who use marijuana daily are going to have a cannabis use disorder. In adolescents, overuse results in things like amotivational syndrome. You see grades falling, poor driving skills, increased anxiety, depression, and sadly, an increase in suicide.
Laura, how have the methods and frequency of use among Colorado's high school students changed since legalization?
Well, the youth have really changed how they use marijuana in Colorado since legalization, as reported by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the CDPHE. In the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, we see that from 2015 through 2019, that the use of smoking flower or herb has declined significantly. That seems like great news, but unfortunately, the use of dabbing, vaping, edibles, which are the far more potent varieties of marijuana, have all statistically increased, 156% increase in dabbing. So we know that the youth are using far more potent means of marijuana.
You just mentioned edibles. How are the marijuana products children are using today different from what was used during the 1960s through the 1980s?
Well, the difference in the marijuana from the 1960s until now has to do with the potency, the percentage of the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, indeed into the 2000s, was very weak, between 2 to 5%. In the 2000s, maybe 10% THC content. Whereas what the youth use today are very high concentrate. Flower can be up to 30% in legal dispensaries purchased, and the concentrates that are being made today start at 60% THC all the way into the 90s for the more pure concentrates. Vapes and some of those edibles have the distilled oils right into them. So they can be extremely dangerous since the young children often don't know how potent they are.
Laura, how do you know if your child is actually addicted to marijuana?
Well, you would know if your child were addicted to marijuana because they would start acting differently than before. Now, sometimes it's a little tricky because teens are already irritable, sleep a lot, right? Often have trouble with friends. But you'd want to start looking for things that are more unusual. Perhaps they lose interest in the things that used to give them joy. Maybe they are sneaking around a lot or acting a little secretive. Perhaps they are sleeping more than usual. If you're seeing some strange indigestion, stomach issues, your child is suddenly vomiting a lot, these are the types of things that should raise your antenna.
And can marijuana cause psychosis in adolescents and young adults?
We know now, and in fact, Sir Robin Murray, who is one of the foremost cannabis researchers in the world who lives in London, just made a statement that he believes, he is 100% certain that marijuana use in adolescents causes psychosis, in that indeed he believes he would see 30% fewer schizophrenia patients in his clinic if indeed marijuana were not used by youth. So sadly, we now can say that there is a causal link between the use of marijuana in adolescence and developing later psychological issues, including cannabis-induced psychosis. Denmark repeated this study in 2021, where they looked at the incidence of schizophrenia in their population before marijuana, 1994, and then after 2010. And they said that because of the introduction of marijuana, they went from a 2% to an 8% incidence of schizophrenia in their population that they attribute directly to marijuana.
Laura Stack, you are an absolutely wonderful guest. Please come back, and thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
To learn more facts about today's marijuana and its impacts, visit the National Marijuana Initiative's website at www.thenmi.org. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Perspectives.